What are you looking at, Winston? All right, let's do this. This is a Viva on the street, but this vlog has nothing to do with Quebec law. I have now watched a full week of the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, and I'm going to try to summarize in one Viva on the street a week's worth of trial, a week's worth of 7 to 8 hours a day live streaming on Nick Rekieta's channel. Nick Rekieta has been streaming this trial day in and day out with live commentary, and it's been fantastic. I popped in and out in as much as I can, trying to manage the lifestyle that I have. And how do you summarize a week of the most high-profile murder trial that the internet has seen arguably since Chauvin, and then arguably since O.J. Simpson? It was an amazing week because it started off with opening statements. So I'm going to mess up the names. I'm going to try to keep it simple. So Binger is the prosecution, Richards is the defense, and I'm going to use those words interchangeably for the prosecution team and the defense team. And Binger and Richards started off the trial, as most trials do, with opening statements. And the opening statements were kind of irritating for anyone with any remote experience with the practice of law, in that Binger, in his opening statements, was getting a lot of stuff in that you probably don't want to allow to get in opening statements. People in real time on the interwebs were saying, "What the heck is going on, Richards? Why aren't you objecting? You should be objecting to half of the stuff that Richards is now editorializing in opening statements, which will be, in theory, admitted, or at the very least admissible as fact insofar as it was admitted in opening statements." People were faulting Richards for not objecting left, right, and center. It's very easy to play Monday morning quarterback, and like I said in one of my tweets, it's easier when you think that these are objective mistakes and not subjective mistakes. But setting aside the objective mistakes, after opening statements, they got into the witness testimony. How's it going? And the witness testimony was very interesting. Now, prosecution starts off by making its case. So the prosecution calls its own witnesses, the witnesses which it thinks are strongest to make the evidence that is required to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And the prosecution called as witnesses, there were a bunch of them. There was McGinnis, who was one of the videographers, journalists who recorded a lot of the events of that evening. Bulch, who was another one of the individuals who showed up with firearms to protect the site. You had Rosenbaum's girlfriend testify. You had two of the children of the car shops testify, and there was a great aunt of, I believe it was Huber, who's the skateboard guy who also got shot dead in the melee of events. And this is one of those cases where you can look at the prosecution and ask if the prosecution is working for the defense, and you can look at the defense and say, is the defense trying to throw this case? Because by and large, very few witnesses that the prosecution called actually in any reasonable realm of the universe could have reasonably helped the case. They called McGinnis, who was the individual recording the events, and, above and beyond showing the video footage of Rosenbaum in his final moments, which, might be disgusting, distressing, and very upsetting to watch, do not make a case. Above and beyond replaying those video footage over and over again, McGinnis, the guy who shot that footage, at one point the prosecution asked, and violated, as far as I'm concerned, one of the fundamental rules of law: do not ask the question unless you absolutely know the answer. Said, what gave you the indication that, what was going on inside Rosenbaum's head? Rosenbaum was the 5'3", 150-pound individual, convicted pedophile, which is not yet in evidence before the jury to be determined. This individual, who was discharged from a psychiatric hospital the very day of the events, who was the hyper-aggressive individual, according to McGinnis's testimony. They said, what gave you an inkling as to what he was thinking? And the witness literally said, and this is in the prosecution's evidence, the witness literally said, he said, "F you," and reached for the gun. That's what the prosecution's witness said in testimony, which is probably not the best evidence that you want to get in in principle chief evidence. Another thing that the prosecution admitted as evidence was Bulch, who was one of the individuals carrying the ARs who showed up there like Kyle Rittenhouse, who really didn't do much to add to the overall innocence of the, I say victims with, quotes, the individuals who were killed by Kyle Rittenhouse, one of which was hyper-aggressive, the other one was striking him with a skateboard, and the other one pulled out a concealed firearm, concealed handgun. And it was Bulch, I believe, who said after it was Grosskreutz, this is the guy who pulled out the weapon, was not one of the ones killed, but had his bicep shot off, 90% of his bicep shot off. The prosecuting attorney who called this individual as their witness in chief said, what happened after, I don't know who that person is, who said, what happened after you saw that individual holding the gun? After he got his bicep blasted off, the gun was on the street. And Bulch said, I emptied the chamber of that gun that I found on the street after pulling out the cartridge from the handle. And, it turned out in cross that he emptied the chamber because there was a bullet in the chamber, meaning that gun was ready to fire. So you've gone now, of your three victims, you have Rosenbaum, hyper-aggressive individual released from a psychiatric ward the same day, screamed F you and reached for Rittenhouse's gun. Then you got Huber, striking Rittenhouse over the head with a skateboard, trying to take his gun apparently. Then you have Grosskreutz, who had a concealed firearm with a bullet in the chamber ready to fire, and these are the prosecution's witnesses. So it didn't really go that good as the week progressed. And it didn't really go that good, not because anybody did a good or a bad job, because it's not because it turned out well that defense did a good job, and it's not because it turned out badly that prosecution did a bad job. It's just the file that you're dealing with. So it turned out that way, probably notwithstanding the performance of any of the attorneys. Except when you're the prosecution, maybe you don't want to call witnesses who you don't know what they're going to answer in terms of questions. And when you're the prosecution, maybe you want to prep your witnesses a little more before you call them in chief for the highest profile murder case in recent memory. So it didn't go all that well. Then they called the girlfriend of Rosenbaum, who I don't know why they called her. I think the only reason why they called her was to determine that the bag that Rosenbaum, the hyper-aggressive individual who screamed F you and then reached for Rittenhouse's gun, the only reason they called his girlfriend as a witness was to testify to the fact that the bottle that he had in his hospital bag, because he had just been released from the psychiatric ward of a hospital, did not contain an explosive or acid. Gentlemen, sorry. So that was the only reason why they called Rosenbaum's girlfriend, or ex-girlfriend. I guess she might still be his girlfriend. I'm not trying to be glib. That's why they called her. The great aunt had nothing to offer, but then the prosecution called not the owner of the car depots, the 1, 2, and 3, the children of the owners, to presumably have them testify to the effect that they never asked Rittenhouse specifically to come as security for those car dealerships. And the children, I mean, when I say that the defense attorneys should have probably accepted whatever offers were on the table for behavior specialists to give their insights and help with the trial, the prosecution could have done the same thing. Because I'm sitting there watching the prosecution call this witness, which is their witness, and it's quite patently obvious that there was minimal, if any, prep done with these witnesses, because the witnesses were not understanding the questions from the prosecuting attorney, and the prosecuting attorney could not appreciate why the witnesses were reluctant to answer these questions, because they were asking questions that could, in theory, inculpate the witnesses' family business because of the corporate financial insurance structure of those businesses. It could have inculpated the witnesses in terms of, in theory, vicarious liability from a civil suit, because if these car dealerships in fact mandated called Rittenhouse and the like to come protect their businesses, and the people they called to come protect their businesses actually resulted in the death, murder, whatever, wrongful death or justified death, it could in theory imply the responsibility, the vicarious liability of those who mandated the individuals to do a job that resulted in the death of another individual. But it doesn't seem like the prosecuting attorney had any inkling to any of this or had done any prep for any of this. And it didn't go well. It didn't go the way the prosecuting attorney probably wanted it to go. So, all of this to say, after watching a week of the trial, after listening to Nick Rekieta for close to 8 hours a day when I'm driving my kids to school, picking them up, after watching all of this, it genuinely seems, and there's going to be a lot of people out there who can say, it feels like the prosecuting attorney is actually trying to help Rittenhouse, and it seems like the defense attorneys might be trying to throw him under the bus. It's very weird, but it highlights a lot of the do's and do not do's of a criminal prosecution, criminal defense, high-profile criminal case, knowing that the entire world, the aggregate knowledge of the internet, are going to be meticulously watching this and waiting to pick apart every mistake that they can to make themselves feel smarter and to make them look better in the eye of the social media limelight. But it is a learning experience for everyone. Get over here, dude. It's a learning experience for everyone. And my goodness, what a learning experience it has been. There's still another week to this. But after having seen the first week and what were presumably the strongest witnesses of the prosecution, having seen the way they performed, the zingers that they issued, notwithstanding the expectations of the prosecuting attorney, if this does not result in acquittal, I'll be shocked, but I've been wrong before and I've been shocked before. But we'll see. We've got another week of this, so it's going to be an interesting week. Sunday night, doing this, talking about it with Robert Barnes on our live stream. I might try to do either a lunchtime or après trial live stream just to go over the summary, but this has been week one of the most high-profile murder case since Chauvin, since O.J. Simpson. This is the essence, the essential of what you need to know, and it will allow you to know more than 95% of the people out there who will read the headlines and have not seen 1 minute of the trial. It's been fascinating. Viva Fry. Catch us on locals, vivabarneslaw.locals.com, Rumble, Twitter, you know where to find us. And Sunday night, it's going to be a good one. Peace. Peace.